ceremony for all the people who died
Yeah.
and their care. And so we passed it, go from that music area.
Oh, is it? Oh, you passed a new high school? Yeah. Hi, Burl. I was just telling her, Jill and some high school teachers, Jessica, Jason Bates, Tia, they just got back from Berea. They went to look at their new high school. Remember how they had two high schools? They had Big Park and Berea.
Yeah.
Their population is contracting, so they brought them both together. They built a new high school, and they loved it. They thought it was beautiful.
I didn't know that was going on.
Yeah.
Wow.
It took a few years because there was a lot of anger.
So did they tear down both?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But when did they build the new building?
They've been in it 2 years.
Okay.
So I went to a play there, I want to say like 3 years ago, and I saw it getting started.
Huh.
Like Baldwin Wallace, they have really good drama on there.
I wonder how, that can't be. Although I have a friend in Sandusky, and they have the same kind of issue.
Yeah.
I mean, they're losing kids to charters and privates, but
yeah,
they're.
Eugene Sanders, the former superintendent of Cleveland, is the superintendent in Sandusky.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting, totally different kind of problem to have. The shrinking.
All of Northeast Ohio is shrinking.
Yeah.
We're all moving here.
Right. We're not getting any additional residents in the state. They're just all coming here.
But the rudeness quotient is going up and going. No, you've been here long enough. You're not rude anymore. You were probably rude right when you got here. Bro, you probably were too. You're not a rude.
Columbus just got it all out of me somehow.
Yeah.
Where were you from?
Mayfield Heights.
I was the near West Side, 25th and Clark.
Okay.
The West Side Market area.
Yeah.
That's where I grew up.
It has changed. I mean, the area, well, it's changed like a couple times since
Yeah.
then. I haven't been to West Side Market in a long time. Do you still have family that's there?
My sisters are in the area. My dad just died this last spring.
Okay.
He's 95
Okay.
and lived in Old Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I feel like I could do that drive up and down 71 in my sleep.
yeah, I'm going to go back again this weekend. I think we can finally turn this house down.
Oh, yeah.
I think everything will be on the button.
So did you say your siblings are still there?
My two sisters are. My brother lives in Arizona.
Okay. Or do they have families that are
Yes.
there? Yeah. Yeah. How old were you when you moved to Columbus? Was it for school or was it? Okay. Yeah. When we moved, we were like the only ones in our immediate extended family that had ever left. And I think they still think that maybe one day we're coming back.
Yeah,
Steve, where did
back up there for about 8 years.
Really?
Where did you move?
Strongsville.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because Bill worked in North Bridgeville and I worked in Brexville, Garvey Heights.
Right in the
Strongsville
middle.
was
Yeah.
In the middle.
Yeah.
And then he retired. And it's like, now I have to drive.
Are we recording that?
Right.
You know what people call
Strangeville.
Actually, maybe. Hi, Daphne. that part you were concerned about that contradicted,
Yeah.
that is the law.
Oh.
But we don't have to add it. We don't have to call attention to it.
Okay.
It is the law, so we can do the policy without that.
Oh, okay. All right. Great.
She said, look, I know nobody loves it. She said,
Okay. All right.
I'll do my best.
It is Thursday, October 28th, and we are ready to begin our policy and governance committee meeting for the quarter. And in attendance today from the board is Matt Campbell, Burl Picolantonio, Brian Hairston, and myself. And we are going to adjust the items for discussion, and there are some that upon working on, we would like to table so that we can provide some more research and get input from experts in those areas before they come before the board. So as we go down through the list, I'll just let you know when we table them, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, and the first item on the list is policy number 0169.1, and there are a couple of changes here. Let me just get my list up. The changes that Neola has prescribed for us are due to a recent decision of the U.S. District Court for the Sixth Circuit. And so some of the optional language has been eliminated. And they also then remove the authority of the presiding officers to regulate speakers on the basis of comments that are abusive, frivolous, and or harassing. So we can look at the template from Neola, and I did notice if anybody has any comments. Do you want to speak to them first and then I can go through, or you want me to go? Okay. We provide the opportunity at regular board meetings, which is one of the first options, and we publish the rules to govern those that participation at board meetings. The presiding officer is permitted and shall administer the rules, and the following rules are as indicated on the order of business at the discretion of the presiding officer, and anyone having a legitimate interest in the action of the boards may participate during the designated public participation portion of a meeting. Attendees must register their intention in the public participation, and they do that upon their arrival at the meeting. There's a lot of green ink on the top of the second page. One of the questions is item D. Individuals may not register others to speak during public participation. That currently is an option. Is that something that going forward we want to keep as an option? Or should somebody only register themselves?
Have we had any trouble with
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
No problem.
He also wasn't unmuted, so he's
There
going to
you go.
repeat.
We're good now. Have we had any issues with people registering other people? I don't know how often that happens yet.
So it does happen, and I think it has happened more frequently. And I guess the one thing that I would like to say at the onset of this discussion is that I don't think that we have
I shouldn't say we, I have not enforced our policy to the letter of the policy. I recognize that at some point when our public participation volume started to increase. For example, when we get to it, there is a time limit on the period of public participation, and I have not enforced that at all. I have some thoughts about the time limit. And when we get to that part, we can talk about that. But yes, we have had people register other people to speak, and I have not stopped that from happening. I guess I come from a place with this policy in general that we should be encouraging as much public participation as people want to provide. I think that's where, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think has been the feeling of this board consistently.
I agree.
My only real thought about limitation has to do with whether or not we're comfortable with people who don't live in the school district participating. But other than that, I guess my general outlook on the policy is that it should be as permissive as we can make it while still having an orderly and respectful meeting. So
Yeah.
that was a long answer to
No,
your question, but I don't know what that means as far as that point goes with registering other people. It has happened from my perspective. I don't think it's a problem.
Right. I don't know that there's an issue with it in spirit, and as long as someone's not signing someone else up without their permission.
Right.
If in that matter of convenience to communicate to the board or the presiding officer that, hey, this person isn't here yet.
Right.
They're 5 minutes away. They want a chance to talk and to be orderly.
Right.
I'm fine with it.
I have even allowed someone to read someone else's statement when that person wasn't able to get here.
Right.
And I was aware that I was doing it at the time. It wasn't consistent with our policy that we had at the time. I guess, again, I didn't feel like that was a problem. I feel like even in an instance where there was bad intent and somebody was attributing a statement to somebody, I feel like there would be a way for that person to correct it if that happened. Like in a scenario where, let's assume there's bad intent involved and somebody said that they were reading a statement on behalf of somebody else and that wasn't actually that other person's statement. I feel like there would be a way to correct the record. I don't know. What does anybody else think?
Such as a footnote in the minutes, that's
or that individual could come to our next meeting and make their own statement, or they could write an email even that we would read at the meeting to make sure that it was clear. I'm not saying that situation has ever happened. It hasn't, but I'm just thinking through, like, if we open it up in that way, that's the worst case scenario I can think of. And I feel like that's something that could be corrected.
I'm all for openness and working with each other to make sure that, because there are other tools that the presiding officer has in their bag to utilize to keep things orderly.
Okay, great.
I just think we should have the discussion since it's.
Yeah, we should have the discussion, and I think that we should have a policy that actually reflects what we want to do. And I think that there were some areas, like I said, of the policy that didn't really reflect the feelings of this board. And so I wasn't actually following the policy.
So are you going to point those out as we go through? Okay, great. Okay, so that one will remain not included. E, all pieces of E are included in our current E. I don't have any issues all the way down to I.
Right. I agree with E. I think Burl is correct in that you know, the people that live in the school district should have first voice on speaking to the school board.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a way that, is that where we are?
Well, I think when you get to the address portion of it,
The E, the item.
the third item in E, I think that helps us identify whether or not they're in the school district.
So, yes, we don't currently have anything, and I don't think we should I'm not saying that we should limit participation only to people who live in the school district, because I can think of instances when perhaps, I don't know, a business, somebody who owns a business who doesn't live in the school district, but the business might be in the school district. I can think of instances when somebody like that might appropriately be addressing the board. I do wish that we had some language in here, though, to prevent a situation where somebody who has no connection to our school district,
Yeah.
I don't know why we would allow that person to speak at a board meeting.
So could we add a qualifier here?
Yeah, I think that we should add a qualifier. It should be broader than living in the school district. In my opinion, but I think that we should add a qualifier that the person has to have some, I don't know how to word it. I mean, I did look at some other policies. I didn't find any wording that I liked, but
Would it be under affiliation? Because it's referring to group affiliation.
right.
I mean, if we hear from a teacher who obviously teaches in our school district but does not live in our school district, obviously we would welcome them.
Right.
Residential or professional nexus. I said, could it be like a resident or someone that has a professional relationship or nexus with?
So could we say group affiliation or relationship to school district?
Or could you?
What the thing that I'm concerned about is that the way this is worded, it doesn't say that if they don't, that they can't speak.
So,
That's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to
we have to
say.
go back to the
so
beginning. for that.
what I was wondering, could you, this has its own problems, but could you have people request, if they don't live in the school district, state what their relevant reason for addressing? Is it urgent? Is it immediate? Is it to the public good? And that way you can kind of see, because I don't think you can possibly write anything, capture
No,
language.
couldn't,
You could
right.
say things like relevant, but that means different things to different people. So, if for residents, for people who want to speak, who live outside the district can request the opportunity to speak 48 hours in advance.
I guess I think that it should say participants must first be recognized by the presiding officer who will consider the following factors.
Okay.
And then it kind of, I think, makes it more clear that there is, like, if, I don't know, if you're flying in from California and you have no connection to our school district.
It's a question of standing in a way.
I'm
But a little more flexible than standing.
Right.
But it is standing, investment, things of that nature.
Right.
It's not everybody who says they care about kids. It's what is your connection to our local school district, and why should our community grant you time?
right.
That letter B,
That is letter E.
look at letter
Which letter? E.
B.
Anyone having a legitimate interest?
And that's in our current,
Yeah,
and I'm wondering if on the form that they complete, that they put their purpose for speaking.
they do. The current form that we have does have them state the topic that they want to speak about.
because I'm thinking about, I just watched last Thursday's meeting and they weren't speaking to the board necessarily. A couple of them were giving campaign speeches. Like,
I think speaking to the board comes up in the, maybe we're gonna hit that in letter, is that H? Where we might also want to talk about, and should be directed towards the presiding officer only, rather than to the crowd. And I've run into this in the past too, when we have tenuous issues.
Right.
We tend to have some people that want to speak to the board, but they turn around and their back is to the board. And rather than truly addressing the board, you know, whether it's a coaching issue or some other kind of issue, they come to speak to it, but they don't always address the board the whole time. They
Right.
turn and they address the crowd.
right.
And I think that needs to be clarified.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm hearing correctly, on item E, the concept is on the floor of amending it to say participants must first be recognized by the presiding officer for consideration in speaking to the board.
I don't think that, what did I say? Participants must first be recognized by the presiding officer who will consider the following factors.
Because who else is there?
Yeah, and I do agree. I mean, letter B does address that. I just feel like they need to be tied together.
And then in the fourth or the third piece down, then are we saying group affiliation or relationship to school
Yeah,
district?
yes,
If and when appropriate,
yes,
but we don't want if and when appropriate. We want it every time,
Right,
correct? So
right.
we're gonna strike that.
Right. So. Yeah, so everybody has a chance to say, I work for the school district. I'm a parent in the school district. I'm a taxpayer to the school
Right.
district. Those sorts of things would definitely apply.
Right.
And I think that letter B gives the presiding officer the ability to filter through and maybe ask the questions when they're getting ready to recognize an individual.
Right.
Because this does allow the presiding officer some flexibility in the way I read it to recognize or not recognize.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right. Then F is this, it's 3 minutes currently included in ours. G, we have defined that we have the process take place during public participation, so that green text I think is important to adopt that Neola put in there. H, and then in I, we do have this currently. I would like to offer that I think it would be grossly unfair for somebody to submit something at 5:15 that they want in at 6:30.
Mhm.
So I would like to see a time frame inserted. And I'm thinking that
Yeah.
the person operating the recorder shall contact the superintendent prior to the board meeting. How should that be worded? At least 4 hours, or what would you like, Steve?
I think one business day.
One business day?
Let me unmute myself. I think one business day minimum. I think if you're going to ask the administration to put together the work to coordinate your efforts on whether it's an audio or video recording that you want to share, I think it's fair for 24 hours notice.
Is that fair?
And you can
Yeah,
place that it's at the discretion of the presiding officer.
Yeah, it does take some logistics
Right.
to get them set up.
Everybody okay
Yeah.
with that? Okay.
Should ask Matt.
I know.
And I would say, I think our 3 minutes plus 2 seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, when most people are allowed 5,
Yeah,
I
nobody
think that's
runs out
fair
of
to the
time.
rest of the
Only
community.
my
and-
son, but.
Yeah.
Well, and I just think that it seems to be working really well.
I would agree.
Okay, and then we get to J, which is basically the same concepts, but they've kind of combined 1 and 2 in the new wording here and expanded the green text there. I don't know if you all are on the proposed. Or
Yeah.
Okay. So that's my take on it. Does anybody have any issues with that?
Can we just revisit H just real quick?
Can you say it louder?
H, just revisit, I would think that we'd want to, do we want to add clarification, a short statement that all statements and that you're not, that the, all statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. You know, something to the effect of, you're not here to address the crowd, you're here to address the board.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to write that text, and I'll be interested in ideas, but I think that would be the appropriate section for that kind of clarification to go.
So can I read you a paragraph that I see? I pulled up a couple different school district public
love that.
participation policies.
Mhm.
So this one is from a school district up in Northeast Ohio. It's Beechwood, their public participation policy. They have a paragraph that says, the Board of Education will listen to speakers, but may choose not to comment, give answers, or expect the administration to give answers at the meeting when comments are made. It is the practice of the Board of Education to refer inquiries to the superintendent or his or her designee, who will investigate or give considerations to the matter and report to the individual or group making comment to the Board of Education. If any matter is brought up to the Board of Education that is deemed to be so complex, important, or controversial that it merits a special hearing, the board president may appoint a Board of Education member. This is get more, I'm gonna stop where I was. The part that I was looking at was that beginning part, and it doesn't entirely address the point that you were making, but I think it frames what the expectations are and kind of makes clear that the purpose is to be addressing the board. It's not an opportunity to perform for the community. You're addressing the board.
It also addresses the expectation of that the answer might not be forthcoming right there.
Right.
It might take time.
And that there's not going to be dialogue,
Right.
which is always incredibly awkward. But
The only thing I would worry about is the hearing piece.
yeah,
because
I didn't mean to continue.
I might-
That's all part of the
If we had
paragraph.
a bunch of people requesting those, we would, it'd be hard to.
Yeah.
administer.
I don't know if that entirely,
I
So
think
could we make
it's
it a little
closer.
more succinct and say further? The message should be delivered to the board, not community or community members present. I mean, is that the kind of reinforcement you're looking for?
Further, the message should be delivered solely to the board. Sorry about using adverb there, but sometimes I think that some people forget.
I mean, it doesn't have to be relevant though, because I know we're talking about masks and things of that nature. If we're talking about masks and things of that nature, just the other day, then there was comments regarding violence and stuff in the schools, and I was just saying, it just seemed to me that, I was thinking, where did that come from? Because, everybody else was on a certain subject matter, but so I don't know if there's a way that we could say related to, maybe agenda items, things that we're discussing, something like that.
So some school districts actually have 2 periods of public participation in their board meeting. One at the beginning of the board meeting, which is related to agenda items. And then there's a second period of public participation where people can talk about anything. I personally think it makes sense just to keep them all together, but just, I guess, as an example of how other school districts handle that, they do separate it out. So if you have any comments to make about anything that's on the agenda, you can speak here. And then if you have, I guess, any other related to the district comments to make, it's in a whole other period of public participation. I mean, I guess we should start with the fact that the board is not required to have any public participation at its meetings. That's something that we choose to do. So we can really set whatever parameters we want. But I do think we said, and I think it's true, that we want to encourage as much of that dialogue as possible. I don't know.
I think people are pretty satisfied with our process, as you were saying, Matt. And I think it's worked, and few times have people run out of time, and I think it's working.
Right. So I think refining it, I think it would be very difficult for most citizens to understand some of our agenda items, because we do use a lot of acronyms and things like that. So I think that would be very burdensome, and probably not able to be followed too well. So it is adding the message should be delivered solely to the board as an addendum to H, acceptable to everybody.
Yes, I think I would love to see a sentence that clarifies the expectation, though, that that it's not a two-way dialogue.
Okay, so
the one you read from Beechwood?
Yeah,
Some of that.
because I don't think that anything like that is currently, it's nothing like that is currently in the.
to me, that is so important. It should be in the first paragraph, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
thinking about.
Yeah, that would
communicating.
be fine for a location.
Could you read that Beechwood one again?
Yeah, and I'll stop where I meant to stop last time. The Board of Education will listen to speakers, but may choose not to comment, give answers, or expect the administration to give answers at the meeting when comments are made. It is the practice of the Board of Education to refer inquiries to the superintendent or his or her designee, who will investigate or give consideration to the matter and report to the individual or group making the comment to the Board of Education.
Now, that sounds really good from an attorney. I think for the common person, it's very difficult.
I mean, I have no pride of authorship in this. I did not write it.
Yeah,
So
I
if there's a
understand.
better way to word it.
So can we go back to the first paragraph, and the second sentence says, the board offers public participation to members of the public. And maybe we just insert to address the board without expectation of dialogue or response that evening, in accordance with the procedures below. I know it's a big, long sentence, and I love big, long sentences. So you can tell me to cut it in half, but.
I would probably make it 2 sentences, but.
Yeah.
I agree, but I think the intent is there.
I think
I
that
like
it's
the
in the
location
right
and the
spot,
intent.
right?
As long as we're not creating an entire huge block of text, I think you got something there.
Okay, well, maybe I'll work with Steve and Kimberly, and we can make it grammatically pleasing to everyone.
That was pretty good.
Okay, well, you and I.
It's gonna be a quick meeting.
Sentences. Cut into, okay, all right, I made a note on that. Okay. Okay, have we solidified H? And then in I, we're gonna add a time frame, 1 business day. J is a merge of 1 and 2 from our current. On 3 under J, that little green areas are new. 4 and 5 are in our current. 6 is not, and 7 is that 7? I kind of wrote over it. With the approval of the board when necessary is there. We do have currently a 20-minute time limit for public participation.
It is never enforced. And again, in my opinion, I don't, it seems like such an arbitrary time limit. I understand
It
that
says unless extended by the board, so we are all good.
yes, but I never ask the
Oh.
board to extend it. I guess from my, I mean, I have watched board meetings where they hit the time limit, and then what happens is that the presiding officer asks the board actually has to take a vote to extend time. In theory, I guess I don't have a problem with that. 20 minutes seems like a really short period of time.
Well, if people use 3 + 2, that's 4 speakers.
Yeah, I mean, I understand we want to be respectful of everybody's time, including staff who are there, including board members, including community members, and nobody likes to sit through a board meeting that is 3-4 hours long. I do understand that, but at the same time, I guess, in my opinion, these rules give enough flexibility to make sure that the people who are speaking about things that are connected to the school district.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to impose a time limit on that. I mean, there's a time limit on the individual speaker, but I don't really think that it's fair to impose a time limit on the period.
Unless it's repetitive, right?
Well, and the
then
rules say that.
I understand,
Yeah.
but this kind of helps that too, right? In that different flavors of the same message, right? So are you advocating changing it?
I would get rid of the time limit. But I don't know how everybody else feels.
I think I like having a parameter to work with. So I'm happy as it says that we can vote to extend, but if people understand that there's a parameter to work with, right?
I think my concern is, let's say there's a scenario where I'm trying to think of, I don't know, we're changing the mascot, right? We're not going to have a lion
Capital
anymore,
University.
right? And we have a room full of people that are really angry at all of us. My concern, I guess, would be that the board would vote to not extend the period of time for public participation because the board's already made up their mind. They're sick of hearing the same message over and over and over again. And from my perspective, I don't know, like we were elected to hear that. Regardless of it being the same message, these are different people who each want to express that message.
I see your point too. I see both of the points because I like, even if we were to change the number to say 30 minutes, which is 6 people, I mean, that's pretty healthy, and we go a lot of months without anybody.
Right.
So to once in a while go up to 6, that's fine. I'm with you. You know, we're going to get into those discussions when we start getting the high school, moving the football field, things of that nature that might get some people a little more concerned. And we might have to make an unpopular decision to give them they should have the ability to address the board about their decision about where we're playing our home games when we're moving the football field and things like that, because that will be, people will be passionate about that.
It's gonna come up.
So am I hearing,
Couldn't
how
some
do
of
you
that
feel?
stuff, as far as, you know, you have your design committees, your things of that nature. To me, some of these discussions about where to move the football field and stuff should be in maybe a committee meeting or something like that, versus you're bringing those same concerns to where, if you're in a committee meeting, it's already decided for the most part to move forward to the board for a yes or no vote. So couldn't we kind of trim it back to where, if it's something that's concerning, have like either a committee meeting or special meeting, or something like that? Because that, you know, it will get long. I mean, if you're having 20 people here and they're all going to complain about where to move the football field, I don't.
So I would have two thoughts about that. One, any future board may or may not have committees. That's at the discretion of the board. And those were committees that we all established and continue to keep every year. But a board doesn't have to have those committees. And then I guess my second thought is, I think that the committee environment is it's even less difficult to try to keep people focused than all of the parameters that are in this policy. More, did I say less? I meant more. It's more difficult. I mean, we've had some committee meetings that got way off track from what we said we were talking about. We don't have any guidelines for public participation right now in a committee. So that would be my, I guess, concern with that.
I've seen in the past, I have seen the board during one of these, you know, where people are in passionate situations. I've seen the presiding officer say, I'm only going to be, in the beginning, announced to everybody, I'm only allowing 3 minutes. I'm not extending for anybody, regardless of what your message is. I've got 15, 18 people speaking here, students, teachers, everybody's talking. I want everybody to have a chance to talk and address the board. So we're enforcing the 3 minutes. And then the presiding officer can be a little more vigorous in that. And plus also extend, if we decide we want to change it to keep it at 20 or extend to keep it at 30, or, you know, extend it.
So our options are to eliminate it or to extend the time and then revisit the next time this policy comes up. What is the pleasure of the board members? Eliminate?
I personally would eliminate it.
I think I'd side with Burl on eliminating it, and let's try it out. You know, if it's not broken, try it out. If it is broken, the board can ask the policy committee to reconsider that time limit to put it back in.
Sure. Brian, are you okay with that?
Either or works.
Okay. All right. So we will be eliminating the time limit. Okay. Then the green text at the bottom. This is a new option 1, and a new option 2 is at the top of the next page. The option 1 is the board may permit individuals to attend meetings remotely through live broadcast. However, public participation will be limited to those who are in attendance. And then option 2 is to allow them to participate remotely, subject to the same rules that apply to individuals who attend in person. I think we've been following two.
We haven't actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because we couldn't do it because our policy didn't
Oh, I thought
allow it.
for the short time, did we have a time period during
We had a
COVID?
whole different policy
During
during
COVID.
remote meetings. When we switched back to regular meetings, we went back to our regular policy.
Right. So,
I would lean towards option two. That's what I've asked when we came back to.
I see nodding heads from Brian and Matt. Are we okay with that? I concur.
We've got to figure out how to make the technology available, but
And we've got this really smart man sitting in our midst.
So isn't that just a matter of inviting them in Zoom so they can participate?
there are lots of different ways I think that we could accomplish it. They could come into the Zoom, or they could submit a video recording.
Which is the one we said they need to give you more than a day ahead.
So we did have that last.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right. We did.
I support the expansion, and I think what this allows is people that have something passionate, but they're out of town to address, they'll be able to address electronically. I think that's something special we
maybe
can
they
do now
don't
that we
have
have the technology.
Childcare.
Right.
There could be lots of reasons.
Yeah, I think, I'm good with it as long as there is we're letting them in, because we did have an incident where a little risky transmission went across, where we had to start letting them in. So I think that as long as we have safeguards to avoid those type of things,
So should we refer them to I, where audio and video recordings are permitted? I mean, to me, it kind of,
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we couldn't require that it be a video recording or an audio recording rather than trying to figure out how to do the Zoom.
right. So let's merge this with letter I.
The only thing I
Right.
would say, not everybody knows how to do that.
Knows how to do an audio, or it could be audio or video. With your phone, you could do
Yeah.
It is an expansion of what we're able to do now.
it is,
And I think even a small step in that direction is the way to go.
yeah.
Matt, you just happen to be here, Matt. Do you see any problems with us transmitting or showing or listening to audio or video that people submit as public participation?
24 hours before.
Okay.
We have enough people available in the tech department during that 24-hour.
Okay. So we will add option 2 merged with I. All right. Any other comments on 0169.1? Okay, we're going to move, well, no, we're not going to move to 1530. That is the evaluation of principals, and that one has been tabled.
Yeah.
So we will hold on to that.
So that's the new evaluation system, and we don't have to implement that until next year. So we're operating under the old one.
Next school year.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll have that. Okay, and then we have 30 policies that are all similar except for who they're targeted, so the section of the code that they're in. 1617, 3217, and 4217. And these are with regard to weapons on school property. I have to admit, I did not print this because I thought it was going to be tabled. So
Yeah,
I have part of it.
So the law changed.
Are you on mute?
Oh, sorry.
I'll mute myself.
So Daphne and I had a conversation about this one, and the law changed, and concern I think Daphne had is C, handguns in the possession of a person who has valid concealed handgun license or who is an active duty member of the armed forces with a valid military identification card and documentation of successful completion of firearms training if the handgun remains in the vehicle with the individual or is left in locked vehicle when the person exits the vehicle. It seemed to sort of contradict what was above. And so I talked to Nicole about this, and she said this is the law, but she said we don't necessarily have to put it in the policy. We don't have to advertise it. So I think it's our choice. That's the one you had a question about, right?
Yeah, because, we basically state that no member or employee of member, staff member, teacher, whatever category are prohibited from possessing, storing, making, or using like weapons, concealed weapons in the school safety zone. So to me, that item down there, item C, contradicted our initial statement.
So I think it's a matter of whether we want to leave it in or take it out. It is the law.
I guess I don't know why we would need to state that explicitly. People who meet that criteria certainly know that that's the law.
Right.
Sorry, I took myself out.
There you go. Came right back up.
I'm back. I'm sorry. I was focused on getting my.
Oh, I said, in my opinion, I would not leave it in there. People who meet that criteria and have received that training certainly know the state of what the law is. So I don't know why we need to say it.
I'm wondering if on other policies, we have left portions of the law out because we have chosen to not advertise that sort of thing. Or is that practice we've done? Do we have precedent doing that where we know that it's the law, but we've decided to leave it out of the policy for whatever reason? Have we done that in the past?
I think the answer is yes. I'd have to go through policies
Yeah.
and find, I mean, I don't want to misspeak, so I'm like editing myself as I'm talking. I know that there are occasions that we've had this same kind of conversation. I just would have to go looking to see what those are.
Yeah, I mean, we're beholden to Ohio Revised Code no matter what. And so sometimes policies explicitly state every element of a law. Sometimes they don't. I think, we have to follow the laws of the state of Ohio. So I think, I think putting it in there creates a certain, I don't know, as a school district, it creates a certain, concern, maybe, creates fear. I'm allowed to do this. It maybe advertises it and say people will do it. I just seen, but I don't know. It's up to the board. I think at the end of the day, it is the law and we have to follow it.
So if I understand this policy correctly, if a person, and I'm thinking that C refers to either the civilian or military equivalents of concealed carry.
Right.
Whether or not we have gun-free zone signs and things like that, letter C allows that person to walk on the premises with their concealed carry in, following all the very strict rules that they have to follow anyway, in order to have the privilege of having concealed carry.
Right.
Okay.
So from my perspective, this is our policy, it's the district's policy. So it makes sense to include exceptions that we have control over, like letter B. I'm just like, why would we put in our policy exceptions that aren't things that we have any control or say in? It seems strange to me that we would put that in our policy. It exists in Ohio Revised Code, but it seems strange that we would intentionally add that language to our own policy.
My only argument in favor of including it, and I'm not sold that it has to be included. The only argument that I can see to include it is that it offers that clarification to those particular people that have met those qualifications. It communicates to those people what the district expectations are. But it is our policy, and editing it, as long as the ORC doesn't say you have to explicitly include this language in your policy, then I think it is up to us to decide.
So you already talked with Nicole,
Yes.
our legal counsel, and she said we do not have to include it.
No.
Right?
No,
I
she was
think
clear
the
to
people
say,
that
yeah.
know the law don't need to be told it in this. That's my opinion,
Yeah.
right? And so the people that are on the fringe of knowing that are the ones that you're probably concerned about, right? This is an invitation, in my opinion. And that's why I was concerned with having it in.
Yeah, Daphne, you pointed out on page 2, the second to last section, unless otherwise authorized by law pursuant to Revised Code 2923, no person shall knowingly possess. So it does have it in there. These people that in this place, in this part that we're talking about, they would be an exception, but they would be following the law because they would be trained, they would be part of the military. So I think we're covered.
And they'd also be registered with the Franklin County Sheriff.
Right.
And have gone through all that entire background process in order to do that.
Right.
So yeah, if legal's advice is that we don't need to include C, and I'm fine with not including it, because those, as long as in the future, we're not taking someone to task for following the law,
Right.
just because it isn't explicitly permitted in our policy.
Right.
But yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, and then item F, they defined, I think, a little bit more, indistinguishable from a firearm as being an exception to the policy approved by the principal as part of a class presentation. I got the feeling we didn't want anything that looks like a gun to come into the school. So is that an exception?
Yeah, I don't think that's something we have to include or would want to include.
Okay. And do we have a version of that now?
In there?
No, right?
think
That's a
so.
new one.
Yeah.
For F.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to touch base on that one. Do not include. Any other questions or concerns on the trio of weapons?
Where would airsoft guns fall under this? I'm thinking that most airsoft guns have the orange tip, and most are distinguishable.
Yeah.
When they're legitimate.
Yeah, unless the tip's taken off or painted or.
Right.
That can be a dangerous situation.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But what I see here, let me double check. A student may not have an airsoft gun in their car on the premises. Is
Right.
that correct?
Right.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions on
Okay.
that?
I think so.
Okay, great. All right. So the next one is 2111.
I
And
think
is this
we're-
one you wanted to table?
Yeah, we're gonna table that one.
Okay. All right.
And then also the next college credit plus. And then the next one would be blended learning, I think.
And so, yeah. Blended learning is 2370.01.
Before we get too far
Okay.
into this, there is legislation that is currently pending related to blended learning. Are we sure that we should address the policy now? I mean, it
Is
is,
it House Bill 110?
no, there's new
Another one?
legislation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. Maybe we should wait and table this just to find out.
because I think that legislation is likely to go through. It just, I would hate to have us work the policy and
Did it?
then,
Do you know if it changes the in-person thing? Is
It
that the main?
does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's wait.
sorry, I should have said something
I'm
before the
glad you
meeting, but
glad you
I,
said that.
No,
I'm-
perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna write table due to pending legislation that may alter in near future. Okay. All right. And now we have 5111. Eligibility of resident and non-resident.
Yes.
And Debbie's here in case we have questions. So this again relates to House Bill 244 that was passed this past summer. And it requires the district to provide children of active duty military with technology-based education. And it also has some other changes. So let's walk through this. The first section, I think, is very much the same, right? The real first change comes under the second section, non-resident eligibility for tuition-free education. And that's where it inserts C, a new C to our current, children of active duty uniformed service members who are subject to transfer, and includes that in the piece. And then anybody have any questions or issues with that? And then our current policy continues with optional tuition-free education. And I guess I'm confused because we don't have open enrollment. So why do we have all this in our policy? Our current policy.
When I reviewed it, I said that we should eliminate K.
I'm sorry?
We should eliminate K because we don't have that.
Okay, so, okay,
do you see the version with Debbie's notes on it, Daphne?
pardon?
There's a version that we have in our folder that has Debbie's
Oh, yeah,
notes
yeah, I have
on
that right
it.
Here.
Yeah, it's in purple pen. It says PO 5111 eligibility, and then it says Debbie's revisions.
Thank you, Debbie. So how does that relate to our current?
I think she's suggesting that I don't want to speak for you, Debbie, but I think you're saying to take it out. She's saying to take it out.
Take out this whole section.
No,
Okay.
letter K.
We have K.
Right,
now?
but she's saying to remove it.
I'm missing it in our current. Am I looking at the wrong one? You're at 5200. I thought we were at 5111.
That's what I'm on.
Yeah. There's a 5511.02.
Okay. Well, the K thing is 5200, I think.
Mm,
Okay, that's all right. I'm just,
There's so, I know, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
there is.
So
We
that,
could play cards with this. It
yeah.
would be great. All right. Okay.
do you want to take a look at it?
Now
then?
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so I agree. This whole from non-resident eligibility for tuition free. Starting at the top of page 3 of our current.
Right.
Right? Would be eliminated. Is that how you read this too? No, you have these things checked.
She has page 3 mostly checked except for I and G.
Yeah, because I think, I don't know, are these applicable in scenarios where there's a superintendent's agreement? Is that what this is related to?
No, I
No.
think this,
I need some clarity.
Do we ever have a scenario where there is optional tuition-free education?
no, well, there are scenarios where people pay tuition. So for instance, they're building a house. They have 90 days to get in to the house, to have it inspected and get a permit. And sometimes it's not done. So superintendent has the discretion to give it an extension. But there are times when, you'll give an extension and you'll say, but from this point forward, if you're not in, you have to pay tuition.
Right.
That's included here.
Yeah.
Right? That's in the non-resident item A.
And Debbie, there's another scenario where people would pay tuition if they're living here. There's been situations where they're maybe living here illegally, right? That we've,
Yeah, these are all
Yeah.
legit. It's where we start here
Yeah.
that we still have it in,
yeah.
that I don't understand why we still have it in.
Yeah. Well, I think Debbie, you went through the page 3 and this whole policy and said, this is our practice and this is what we should abide by.
have In our policy.
I
Right.
know, but what I'm suggesting is it's not
Do you wanna
correct,
get rid of it?
right? We don't have open tuition.
Yeah. Definitely want to change that.
So from the bottom of page 2 through that whole section should be eliminated
Yeah.
to me. Right.
What, there's a header, though.
Right.
I don't think that this page 3 is related to letter K. It's related to the header. That is-
Optional tuition for
Yeah.
education.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, from that point to the next header, students suspended or expelled from other districts, all relates to open enrollment.
I don't think it does.
So,
No, that one doesn't. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it does relate to open
So if a
enrollment.
student is expelled from another district and they
No,
try to enroll
that's
here.
a whole different one.
Okay.
so starting at the top of page 3,
Yes,
the board may admit students tuition free under those circumstances. And these are things that we already do.
Right.
For instance, a senior whose parents move out of the district after the first day that they started.
Yeah.
Letter F, we allow them to finish the school year tuition free so they can graduate from here. So these are things that are already in place.
So they're residents or they're non-residents?
The example she just gave.
Uh-huh.
So it's sometimes, we had it happen this year that a parent will move, maybe there's a divorce, the student starts, they have to be here on the first day of school. Sometimes it's called senior privilege. They've been with their friends and peers through high school. We allow them to finish their senior year, but that wouldn't happen if you were in 7th grade or even 10th grade
Or even the end of 11th grade.
or at the end of 11th grade. And we have those scenarios too, where we have to tell parents, like we actually have had scenarios where there's 2 kids in a family, one's in middle school, one's a senior. We allow the senior to stay, but the middle schooler can't.
So what's the difference between the category non-resident eligibility and optional tuition-free education? Maybe that's where my hang up is. Because what you're describing is non-resident stuff. And it's not in the non-resident stuff. It's in the optional. And so I'm struggling, if I were a parent trying to understand our policy, I think it would be very difficult because
Yeah, because
it
you're saying
looks like
it's an
we have open
exception.
enrollment,
It's
right?
an exception to the non-resident.
Mhm.
Right, so I think there's this non-resident eligibility section that is mandatory, but then we are choosing to add some of these optional tuition-free education. We're just choosing to go beyond that.
And so we understand the item F in the optional. Do we have a practice of all the other items as well?
Yeah, so we've
We
done,
do?
so for instance, H, a student is struggling in a district being bullied. They live nearby. We've allowed students to come here just for the safety of the child.
Okay.
Or superintendent, I've reached out to superintendents. They've reached out to me. We've forged those agreements.
Okay, I didn't,
It's rare.
the categories, I think, was stumping me more
Sure.
than the items,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, all right. That was my only question. Did anybody else have, as you reviewed this, did you have issues on and then Debbie has added under item C, where we need to complete the Eastland Fairfield, which is.
Yeah.
Catch. Any other recommendations you would make? Okay.
Thank you,
Are
Debbie,
you- Yes, thank
for
you.
not only helping us with this policy, but coming to our meeting. We don't get a lot of people.
I know, thank you. Yeah.
I think she did find out why.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just have got hung up on that. Any other issues on 5111?
No, thank you for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a confusing
Mm.
way to organize the policy, but
Yeah. I mean, should we look at changing that header?
I
I
think
think it's almost conditional, not optional, right? I mean, if the condition exists, you look at it. It's not like an option we pluck from the air.
Oh, it's more like exceptions, right? To.
Yeah. But
I
they
don't-
have to have a condition.
yeah, it's
So-
optional
So
for
under these
us.
conditions?
That's what's confusing, is that it's optional for us, and
Right.
we've chosen to include those things. So
Yeah.
I almost wonder if we take out that header entirely, or does that make it to,
To
We
separate
have a
what is
header that says
legal.
non-resident students can attend under these circumstances.
Right.
Just, boldface.
right? Collapse them together,
Face, the board may admit.
right?
Yeah, may consider it
Start
under these
bold
circumstances.
this section, yeah.
And get rid of the
and
Yeah.
eliminate the
So
header.
the board may admit students,
Yeah, that-
may
Tuition-free
consider
under the
admitting students
following
under these
circumstances.
exceptions, these considerations, yeah.
are you guys okay with that?
Yep.
It would make me, like, I struggle with that. I'm so sorry. Okay, 5111.01, homeless students. And this, there are new changes. It's just a function that is one we have to renew annually.
Debbie, that one's good, right?
Yeah, we had no comments. of her. Okay. Okay, as is. 5111.02 is pretty much an overhaul, isn't it? No, maybe not. There are quite a few changes, yes. All those 4 paragraphs in green font. And oh, it's not you, okay.
I think these changes are all good.
They're all basically, oh, Jill, I think looked at this one, right? House Bill 244.
Yeah.
Driven.
Yeah, I think it's,
I didn't have any issues. Does anyone have any?
we're talking the changes in green.
Pardon?
I don't think we have a choice.
No, I think
Yeah, okay. Okay, as is. All right. And
I mean, I think it's, I just want to be clear, because that sounded like a snarky comment. I did not mean it that way. It's actually a good update to the law.
it's very good.
Intended to address the situations where a family.
They're getting redeployed, they have a house here, they have to find one there, trying to pay for it, trying. To try to be
Yeah.
understanding and work. with
It's hard enough on kids who are having to relocate like that.
very hard.
We're going to move on to policy number 5200, and it is titled attendance. And again, some of these are House Bill 110 inspired changes. And again, we are thankful for our expert, Debbie Binkley, who reviewed this for us. I'm sorry?
Debbie's our new cliff notes.
Yes, she is. We like it. I agreed with all of her recommendations. Did anyone have any questions to be asked or concerns on any of the new language? Well, are we okay to accept as is?
Yep.
Accept as is.
So Debbie, were you right on page 2 at the elementary? That should be written in there.
Yes, because elementary and middle schools take attendance at the beginning of the day.
Right.
High school takes it every period.
Right.
And the way they have it written is if there were block periods, which,
Right.
or periods, that would include the middle school, but they don't take attendance that same way.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we will accept those changes. I got actually 2 copies of Debbie's notes on that one. That's how much I loved it. Okay, and now moving on to policy number 5336, which is care of students with diabetes. And I have both of them. Sue Wieging reviewed this for us, our expert. And as you can see, is this a new one? This is a new state law, revised code 3313.7115. So this is going to be new to us.
Yeah.
So the only thing I noticed on Sue's suggestions that it didn't print for some reason, or maybe she doesn't want to include it, is in item C, the end in accordance with AG 5330. Do you notice that?
It looks like it's whited out or something.
So that must be do not include. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure somebody else concurred with me on that. And she is saying that we will not purchase it ourselves, basically, is the option she chose, but we will administer what is delivered to us by a parent.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we agree with that? I agree with that. I think it is consistent with our policy on other
Yeah.
meds. And it keeps the parent in control, right? And then the other option is at the top of page 3, and that is about providing training, which we do, right? And then do not include the option about purchasing and maintaining a supply.
Right.
Okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. So accept as presented. Okay. All right. Next up is 5350. And then, so this is beginning in 2023, so we're ahead of the curve. It requires school districts to include 1 hour or the equivalent of a standard class period of health education in the following: suicide awareness and prevention, safety training, social inclusion. And I think Lisa Kelly reviewed this, and I didn't see any comments, so I assume she approves as presented.
Yes.
And I think we do this already, don't we?
An age?
Is that?
An age. Oh, sure. Second grade or? Yeah.
Yeah, it says grades K through 6. It says in accordance with the law, the board will provide, it breaks it out by age. It says instruction on personal safety and assault prevention to all students in grades K through 6, and then beginning in the 23-24 school year, health education, grades 6 through 12 on each of the following topics.
Two categories,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Because I assume it's in conjunction with the new
Right.
Yeah, I looked at materials on the law too, and this is in line with it.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I said, I'm just curious if we shouldn't include that particular sentence if we are not following it. That's, the situations I know of are where the parent and student approach the district about early.
Yeah, I think we should take it out.
Okay.
because
That is that's something that should be inspired by the family, not the district, in my opinion, right? Because then there could be undesired pressure that we don't need to add to anybody's lives, in my personal opinion. And then in that second paragraph, the changes occur at the start of the semester in the current, which is, I think, a little less disruptive than trying to turn on a grading period. Okay with that then? All right. In the back, or on the page 2, 30 days for an appeal process and then 30 days for a decision. Reasonable? Okay. And then the next to last paragraph, I think just changed because we don't have the Ohio graduation test, so it made it current. Everybody okay with the changes? Okay, with changes. All right. The next one is policy 5516, and it's being revised based on the requirements of Senate Bill 126, which went into effect this month. And it really deals with hazing. I think a lot of it is more relevant for our college scenario, but it is part of any educational process. And it expanded the scope of who was responsible, is one of my takeaways from reading it. So the question is, should we be requiring consultants, alumni, and volunteers to adhere to our policy for anti-hazing?
I guess I have concerns. We don't really have control over those individuals.
Volunteers even?
Alumni, I don't know, just, it's super
Wouldn't
broad.
volunteers include volunteer coaches?
Yeah, so that's what I believe.
What did he say? What did he say?
Volunteer coaches would be included with volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, I-
Those are people that did not receive stipend or not, but they're volunteer coaches for whatever sport. They should know this policy.
yeah, I would agree with you on that. I just, that.
Right.
The way that the options that we have here are pretty broad. I don't know that I would agree on the alumni.
Consultants and alumni.
Yeah,
I'm with Burl.
yeah.
Yeah, I think volunteers is the one to add.
Yeah.
Because that is a common occurrence.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will add volunteers. So then in the 4th paragraph down, we will strike consultants. Do we distribute it to consultants even if the policy? Okay. But we will add volunteers. It's interesting.
I've never seen a situation where a consultant would do that. When you think of like the people who come in to do training, like Green Dot with kids, it's not too often, link crew type things, but.
Yeah.
But they're not usually alone with the
No.
students. That's what I kind of think of, right? And who are people that are alone with the students? And volunteers could very well be, right? Okay. Let's see, I don't think I had any other questions on that. I mean, it definitely dives much deeper into the definitions of hazings and expectations.
And the only other exception I can think of for hazing, and I don't even think this is a reasonable, is with when we invite former athletes to return. which we've run into some situations at times with former athletes. But I don't know that we've run into hazing situations with them.
Yeah.
With
Well,
the
we
way it's
had a-
defined here.
So they'd be guests, right? That are with
They're,
somebody.
they're
with a
guests
staff
of
member.
the staff generally.
Like
the
this
coaching.
past week, this week actually,
We had an Ohio State football player come in, speak to a couple of schools, GJEF organized it. And they were with principals and teachers and kids the whole time. So I don't see a scenario where this would.
And in essence, they would be a volunteer at that point, right?
right.
Mhm. So I know, because I reviewed our insurance policy, our liability policy for the district, and volunteers are covered. Consultants are not, right? Like, so we
Yeah,
we have
consultants should
that.
have their own insurance, right?
They should.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
As a side note, just for side reference at some point, do we have a policy that defines volunteer? Okay, good. I just want to make sure that, so we have that working definition there.
If I remember correctly, Matt, it's 2 tiers. It's
Oh, you're gonna have to.
It's, are you going to be with kids alone? And then the other tiers, are you going to be with kids in a group?
And I think that policy also referenced any kind of background checks and things that we
Yes.
would need to do.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of. Good.
Through a discussion of that policy.
It's been a while, but yes, I think you're right.
Covered a couple.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one up is 5630.01.
Yeah, I meant to say table that
Oh.
because I want to have Sue weigh in on it
Okay.
and just make sure.
Good,
that-
because
that
there
we're-
were some,
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
mhm,
And make sure that that's right.
okay. All right. And then 5722 you asked to table as well, right? I made a note. The current is like a page, maybe,
Yeah.
that were full, and then the template is 9 pages. So when I just laid them out side by side, I'm like, whoops, Daphne, you've got
Yeah. So I think there's
some work to do.
I think there's, I'm gonna go off mute here.
I think there's some interest with GJEA. We've talked a little bit about collaborating on social media policy and making a broad kind of educational pitch to inform people of its use. And when I talked to Nicole about this particular one, after you and I talked, Daphne, we wanted her to look at it, but we also want her to look at it in connection with our acceptable use policy, just to make sure everything's aligned. I think, when we have some people, technology is so embedded into their everyday use that I think, thinking about it differently when it comes to schools and the way it's used in the classroom is really, really important. It can't be the same, sometimes. And so at the end of the day, I think we need to kind of align all those policies and collaborate on them.
Super. I'm glad we're taking that extra step because it should align, right?
Yeah.
And it's, when you do things too quickly, you can miss those. So
Yeah.
happy to know that. All right, Mike Berlingo, we're finally at a finance one. Policy number 6114. And this is cost principles and spending federal funds. And I think it's based on language changes at the federal program level.
It is basically just incorporates federal program language.
You're on mute, Mike. I couldn't
oh.
hear it.
I'm mute now.
Okay, I was on mute telling
Oh,
you. I was on
I'm on mute. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you, Mike. It's
can
on
hear
our
me?
end. Yeah, it's on
Okay.
our end.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I was unmuted. All right. Yeah, so it incorporates the federal language, especially, with purchases of equipment, those type of things, and what's direct and indirect. And we do keep track of assets, if they're purchased with grants. So I don't see any issue with this.
I'm sorry, you referenced about keeping track of assets. This is the federal spending one.
Yes, so if you're spending money on assets through a grant, we do need to track those. It's also kind of in the other policies that we were talking about later. But in order to get or to include assets, you would need exceptions if you're buying specialized equipment that they speak about. So we would comply with that.
And we're consistent in using a $5,000 threshold, correct?
Well, in this, I would say, no, we're adhering more to the current policy where it's like $500 for the district. And we're underneath the 5,000 limit. We're certainly not going to go over 5,000 for these items without getting approval. When we talk about the actual purchases and capitalization threshold, we can discuss that.
Well, Mike, 5,000 is mentioned on page 2 in item B under selected items of cost and under determining whether a cost is direct or indirect, this last sentence of item A, second paragraph.
As well as capital expenditures. Yeah, so it's saying that you can include as direct cost items under $5,000.
Okay.
Yes, and we do keep track of those.
Okay. And you feel that all of the proposed language is correct and to be included?
Yeah, I don't have any issue with the language.
Okay. All right, good. Any board members have any questions? Approve as is? All right. Okay. And the next one is 7,300 disposition of real property or personal property. I'm sorry? Oh, I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I sure did.
You want to
Where
go
is
to
it?
that one? That's Mike's and then I can.
Yeah,
we
do you
can
want
come
to?
back? Yeah, we can come back to that one. I think this needs to be a discussion.
Yeah. I don't have that one.
So you want to
here.
go to 7,300 and come back to 7,250?
Yeah, we
Is
can
that what
do
you're
that.
saying? Okay.
Okay. All right, Mike, I think this
Okay.
is a 7,300 is the disposition.
Yep. So I would check the box that all property considered for disposition may be subjected to appraisal, because certainly there may be items that are negligible value that we don't need or want to be appraised. In terms of what we do today, we usually put things out there for bid through a public auction site if we think it has value. I would say we continue with publication in a newspaper of general circulation. And after property offered for auction, we could basically check all those boxes.
So I noticed that we have 1, 2, and a different version of 3, and then 6, 7, and 8 in our current policy. You're advocating to include 4 and 5. Help us understand why.
Okay, so all property considered for lease or sale should be reviewed by the board prior to solicitation of offers. Yeah, I could ignore that one or not include that because, again, depending upon the value, I don't think the board wants to necessarily review everything that we're going to go to bid with. And then 5, authorized agents of the board to review purchase. Legal counsel. Again, that may be a bit of overreach. So I think you're correct. I said we could include all, but yeah, it would be best, I think, to leave those out just for efficiency.
Okay. Now, the change in number 3 is where it used to say authorized agents of the board. It now says written offers shall be referred to the board finance committee for review and recommendation. So in the
Well,
past, it would have
by
been
the board. I would say finance committee is acceptable because most board members attend every finance committee meeting.
okay. How do board members feel about that?
I need you to,
Explain it.
yes.
Okay, so if we have property, say, let's just hypothetically say, what? One of the properties on Reynoldsburg to Albany Road. And we determine that we're going to sell it, but no acceptable bids were received in an auction scenario. We can sell it at a private sale under these conditions. And so the current policy says that Stephen and our treasurer, and whoever we authorize, would make that decision whether it's a good offer or not. The change in this version of the policy is that it's board finance committee that would review those offers in a private sale.
So my guess is that the board designated superintendent and treasurer to handle that for the same reason that we designate an attorney to handle tax disputes, because we want to keep it as far away from it becoming a political or personal decision as we can. So I don't know, my instinct is telling me that we should keep that designated to the superintendent and treasurer, but I don't know. I mean, I guess I didn't catch that change when I was
So
looking
it's
at
not
these.
green. So it must be, in my opinion, it must have been something that was proposed in the past that we chose not to change. I caught it because I was reading it
I
and
see.
comparing it right next to our current one.
I have a couple concerns with the finance committee language. First one is it reduces the amount of flexibility future boards have in whether or not they want to have a finance committee.
Right.
You all of a sudden have a policy that says all finance committee has this role to play, and then now all of a sudden you have to have a finance committee. The other concern is that the finance committee, instead of referring all of its business up to the general board for the public meeting, it's making decisions within the committee. And that's not anything like what we're doing in any of our other committees. Everything we do in our other committees, we're sending to the general board for approval because it's on the agenda.
Yeah.
Those are my two concerns.
Those are very
I
good
think they're worth
points.
5 cents. And I did note that we, on number 5, the terminology authorized agents of the board was being used. So it was weird to me that change was there. So are you okay if we change it back to the authorized agents of the board?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Again, it would make it a little more efficient.
Okay. All right. We will definitely do that. And then Mike, at the top of page
Under
3,
D, Oh, I'm sorry, are you
Go ahead.
top, the 60% rule? Is that what you're referring to now? Can you hear me?
Yes. I
Yes,
was
okay.
nodding. I was trying not to interrupt you again.
All right, yeah, so this is the new law that was passed, which basically says if we're not using the building to full capacity, we potentially need to sell it. I don't think in any of our buildings will ever run into that situation, but this is for compliance.
All right. And then I think that's really it with regard to that policy. Any other comments? Are we good to make the changes we discussed? Okay. All right. All right.
So
Now,
we gotta go
now
back-
you will, yeah, will you lead that
Yeah,
conversation?
go
Thank
back to,
So this policy under Neil is 7250. It's called commemoration of school facilities. From time to time, the Board of Education may wish to commemorate a school or district facility by means of a plaque or naming the facility after a person. Such commemoration should be reserved only for those individuals who have made a significant contribution to the enhancement of education generally, or the district in particular, or to the well-being of the district, community, state, or nation. It's interesting, it doesn't say students. I think maybe that should be added. Any employee of the district thus honored must be deceased or no longer employed by the district prior to the board's selection of his/her name for a plaque or the naming of a facility. So I think that's an important consideration. Does the board want to make sure that the person is no longer working or no longer active or deceased? Or I think we should just open it up for discussion. And does the board want to put, language about a committee, or how do we we get these requests from time to time, and we don't have a process either. So I think we need a policy and a process to figure out how to do this.
Do we know of any other school districts that have one already established that we aren't starting from scratch?
I mean, we can certainly look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just doing a quick look. It looks like there are a lot of other districts that have this policy in their list of policies. So I would assume
Yeah.
that they have it because the issue has come up there and that they've addressed it in some
Mhm.
way.
So
maybe
we can reach out and find, if you want, if it's okay with you, we can reach out and see not just what other policies are like, but what procedures, and then maybe bring you a proposal. I think we need something because we get asked frequently.
Yeah, I think we should have a policy. I
Yeah.
definitely think we should have a policy. I
Okay.
also think that it makes sense that that the policy address who something can be, or I guess, like, what are the qualities or the relationship to the district in the way that this one does. But I do think that it makes sense to reach out to a couple other districts and see how they operationalize the
Yeah.
policy.
And the beyond this policy, as we think about building the new high school, one of the takeaways from our visit to Upper Arlington, and our team has been to Winton Woods near Cincinnati, and today they were in Cleveland, Berea, looking at new high schools. Upper Arlington in particular did an amazing job with naming different things in that facility. So you go into the field house and there's 3 courts and each court has a family name. The bleachers in the main gymnasium is named after a family on one side and then on the other. And I think there were donations made for those naming rights. So this may, bleed into that in some way as well, because we've sat down with Sharon and Tricia to talk with them about helping us lead an effort to do the same thing. I think we would have a lot of energy around that. I think there were, in UA, there were over 75 things named, very thorough. And they even had a space for their foundation to meet. It's like a community room where they could bring donors in, and it's a very thoughtful process. So this policy could lead to some thoughts around that as we begin to, as we finish plans for the high school and we begin building. So it'll be a good opportunity for community engagement and talking with folks. And some of the things at UA were named after corporations, so Turner Construction Wall, type of thing. So we'll put together a process and a policy for your review. And I'd like to get it reviewed maybe before, when's our next meeting? Like 3 months, right?
Yeah.
So
It's going to be in January. Is that the next? That's the next policy quarterly meeting, end of January,
January.
with the new board.
Yeah.
Depending on what the board decides.
Exactly. Calendar year changes.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
Okay.
But I think your point about including GJEF
Mhm.
is huge.
Yeah.
That's our alumni connection, so
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. What is our current approach to naming buildings? Obviously, building the new Lincoln was kind of simple because it was a replacement of the old Lincoln. What happens when we build a field house or a new middle school?
So our football field is named after Wilbur Strait. I don't know what the process was. I'm going to reach out to his family. I think he's still alive, and we'll reach out to him and talk to him about, our need to move the football field, and trying to learn about that process and the history of it will be an important step, I think. But currently we don't have a process in place for that.
So we don't limit it to, say, one person.
Mhm.
You have something like a plaque, and say someone, you have the original family that owns it, and then another family who was instrumental in the field house, they will be like an honoree also, and then you can actually have engraved name and stuff, so when people come in, they can look at all the people who made contributions to making this field house what it is, versus, well, this person died and they're gonna own it for this image for the next 50 years. And so it gives people an opportunity to regularly be a part of.
Oh, so you make them temporary.
Well,
Is that what you're suggesting? Like
Well, I was saying, even if you didn't
a
have an
time certain?
expiration, you can say like in certain things, you're gonna need every so many years, you're gonna have to buy new furniture, or buy new equipment, and it's going into the field house because technology and training methods are gonna be new. So now, if this person is an honoree for the field house as far as a contributor, and they passed away, and their family wants to leave them a kind of endowment or some kind of money to buy all new equipment in the field house, then they would be on a wall, on a plaque, where their name is engraved, and now you can just annually or every couple of years, you can just add people to it. And I don't know.
The scenario you're talking about, Brian, it could be tiers, it could be large donors, it's
Yes.
permanent, and then
in your scenario, it could be a large donor that's more permanent, but then smaller donors that get their names added, but
Part of it, so
in
they can,
an ongoing way.
a couple years back,
Yeah.
that goes by, they can take their kids to the
Yeah.
game, say, they can see their own family name or something.
Yeah.
donate To this great facility.
And I think that what you're saying, Brian, addresses something that kind of a gap that's in our policies is, what do you do when you really want to raise funds for a building like a field house or something like that, and you want to reach out to the community? How do you recognize them and that sort of, and that approach? So I think the folks that are going to put the policy together are going to have some interesting conversations.
Thank you for the discussion. We'll work on that.
Okay.
And I have next up is 7450.
Inventory.
Well, I don't know that we need to table
I
it,
may have made a mistake. I may
the wrong one.
I may have made a mistake in tabling that. So I think if we can get that done, let's go.
Yeah. Mike, are you prepared to talk about 7450?
Yes. Okay, so I would suggest we maintain some of the previous language. We will maintain a continuous inventory. It'll be reviewed every 2 years, which is consistent with regulations and Gaap reporting requirements, to check that box.
Well, stop, because right
Okay.
now it says we'll do it annually. In the second paragraph.
Let me go back and look at that.
I mean, if we need to change it, we can. I just,
Annually is a real challenge.
how often do we need to do it for our insurance policy?
I'm not aware of any specific language in the insurance policy that says annual or biannual. I would have to check that. Well, it says, well, we will maintain a continuous inventory of equipment and supplies annually. It doesn't say we will audit or reconcile review, which is what this new policy says. So what I would suggest is we set up a rotating cycle so that, buildings are put on a 2-year cycle, and every year we would be doing some of it, which we do now, and we would just maintain that cycle.
So I hear what you're saying, but I'm trying to apply it to the language in front of us. Help me there.
On the new policy or on the old?
Either one, pick it and just define it and then tell us which one you're using.
Okay, so the way I read that second sentence, it says the board shall maintain a continuous inventory of all equipment and supplies annually and in compliance with Gaap reporting requirements. Whereas the new policy, let me go back and open that one. It says the equipment and supplies and the results reconciled with the property records at least once. And that's where I would pick every 2 years. The previous policy doesn't talk about reconciling with records in that sentence.
So are you on the new or the old?
Now I'm on the new.
Okay.
So
Let's
I
stay
would,
on the new.
okay,
And describe for me, the board shall maintain a continuous inventory of all board-owned equipment and supplies and the results reconciled with the property records at least once.
every 2 years is what I would select. And check the box for Gaap reporting requirements, since we prepare Gaap statements on an annual basis.
So you're doing it annual.
Well, we're doing a biannual reconciliation. So what we would do is annually, we would select certain buildings to reconcile. And we would have them on a 2-year cycle. So every year we're doing some inventory, physical versus the records, but not every building every year.
Well, to switch it to every 2 years is not describing what you're saying you're doing. It's saying all of it is done every 2 years.
Which at the end of the second year, all of it would be done if we split it up. You know, if every building is on a 2-year cycle, at the end of the 2 years, we would have completed all buildings.
If you're a new treasurer coming in and you see biennial every 2 years, does that say to you that half is done 1 year and half is done the next?
I think could be your choice that you would either just do it all at one time and then do it 2 years later, or you split it up and do half and half.
Okay, so as a board, what do we want our property records to be maintained? You're saying it's being done half annually. 50%
Yeah,
is conducted annually.
Yeah, we're not doing every building every year today.
So effectively, it's being done every 2 years. Effectively, in effect.
Yes.
Every building is getting touched or inventoried every 2 years, because you have an A year and a B year and an A year and a B year. And so with this method, everything is being done within every 2 years. But I understand the confusion with if we have a new treasurer come in and they ask, so I have 2 years, I can wait 2 years to do each one.
Well, that could be their choice.
It could be their choice, yeah. It could be their flexibility to figure out how they want to do that, whether they want to have an inventory year where they have to try to get everything done, or whether they want to split it up.
So I'm fine either way. I mean, if the board wants to.
My only question is that if I can see how burdensome it will be if we're doing it every year, just for the fact that, you know, when you're talking about equipment like computers and stuff like that, they all have tagged items. So, you know, you can go by and hit it with a gun and do the counts and stuff like this. Now, if you're doing every building, technically you'll say, these are all the chairs. I don't know if we have tags on all these chairs. Some rooms will take chairs out of one room and put it in another. So I can see it being overwhelming unless we're setting some kind of items valued at this amount.
And we do have the value currently at 500 in terms of capitalizing.
A lot of work to try to do.
I agree.
I just want the language to reflect what the practice is, right?
Just put in there that this inventory may be taken or may be done
Every 2 years.
every 2 years, or
Okay, that's great.
or half 1 year and half. It'll just be,
At the discretion of the treasurer.
yes.
Okay. Is that okay, Mike? We're going to put every
Yes.
2 years
Yes.
method at the discretion of the treasurer.
Yes. Now, the capitalization threshold, at least the $500 in the current policy, I would seek to maybe raise that to 1,000, except for those items like computers that we do tag every item. And that would be as a single unit.
So you're suggesting where it has drafting note that the federal regulation allows for a 5,000?
Well, that, I would leave that at the 5,000. Because there they're talking about defining supplies for inventory purposes. But I'm thinking for actual individual items, I would raise that to 1,000 and check the box as a single unit. Now that does not include computer equipment because we do tag all devices. So we could say with the exception of laptops, notebooks, notepads, etc.
Okay. So in essence, keeping it as it is with the you do not define supplies for inventory that's valued at 500 or less, right?
Well, the line above would be 1,000 for the furniture, furnishing, instrument, machine.
1,000 instead of
1,000 as a single unit, and then 5,000 for the supply inventory purposes.
5,000?
Yeah, which is the federal limit.
Okay, I thought I heard you say keep 500 somewhere, so I'm confused.
No, I think I said let's raise it to 1,000 on the one line because I'm looking back at the prior policy. Okay, the prior policy does say 500.
Right. So I'm asking, you're saying raise that to 5,000.
I would make that 1,000 consistent with the other.
So both numbers in paragraph 3 are $1,000.
Yes.
Okay. Does everybody on the board agree with that? Okay.
And in terms of it shall be the duty, currently it says the superintendent, but in most districts, the business manager is responsible for inventory and tracking of assets, that type of thing.
And the business manager reports to the superintendent. So I think that's probably why it's that way.
Yeah, but I would change that and check the box for business manager.
Why don't we just say superintendent or
Designate.
designee? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's okay if we check the box on major items to be spot checked.
Okay, because we don't do that, have that now.
We don't do that now. But I'm thinking for something of real significant value, might be worth doing some spot checks throughout the year.
So who's going to be responsible for that?
Well, that falls kind of under the business manager.
So maybe we should check with Scott Lofton.
Mm-hmm.
Can he absorb that in his?
There's nothing that prohibits that person from doing that if we don't include the language. I don't know that I would put, I mean, I'm not sure that we need to add duties without having updated job descriptions and
Mm-hmm.
things. I think I would not check those boxes.
Okay. Yeah, I would not check the box on consumable supplies. I would not check that box.
Oh,
And then the
you said
next-
yes. Okay.
Oh, not for consumable supplies. Okay, so we're not checking major items or the next one. And then the next section is the treasurer shall maintain a system of property records. And all of those boxes should be checked, A through G, which is consistent with what we have today.
Okay, and just so you guys know, even though it's not green, items H and I are not in our current policy when I compared the two. I didn't see anything troubling with either of them, but I just noted that they weren't in our current policy, so either we missed them in a prior update or Neola didn't make it green like they're supposed to. Right?
Yes, I don't see any problem with those.
Okay. All right. So with the changes we have reviewed, do you want me to summarize it or do you feel that you understand it? Okay. As all right. We are moving on to 80. No, we're tabling 8330, right? Student records? Okay. 8400 is school safety. You want to lead that discussion, Steve?
So every year we have to submit emergency management plans, and this is sort of an update to that. What was in our last update is on page 2, and then one option we have is at the bottom of page 2, number 2. Students may participate in, and we talked a little bit about this with Nicole. Students might participate in an emergency management test at the discretion of the principal in deciding whether and to what extent to involve students in the emergency management test. The principal should consider what benefits student inclusion in the emergency management test may have on the student population's preparation for the emergency and to enhance safety of students in the building. So one of the things that's tough about this is when you go through an actual drill and it has a realistic nature to it, it can scare kids. And so another part of this is, do we inform parents before we're going to do something like this? And so I think we just need to have a discussion about, how realistic these things should be. Should we check that option? I am not a fan of it. I think when you look at the angst and the anxiety and depression, even pre-COVID, and you look at it, after the last 21 or 22 months, I just don't know that doing these things, I think we need to do these drills to the best of our ability, but making them overly realistic, maybe there's an argument to do that in times where there's a little more equanimity. I just don't think.
I'm with you.
So I'm not for checking options 2, but I would say check option 1. Students, they will participate in. I don't think we need option 1 to. Parental consent isn't in our current one. But I think what we currently have in the next section is fine.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find where in our current policy. I can't find it.
What are you looking for?
Where does it even address?
Drills.
Yeah, do we even have it checked at all?
It's right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the first page, Oh, this is really the document that it's addressed.
So do we select option 1 or option 2 in our current policy?
It's option 2. I guess when I read it again, the principal should consider what benefits student inclusion. Within that, what I just described in our current moment, they could consider this and say, this isn't a good time to make this overly realistic. So I think option 2 is fine.
And you're saying we don't currently have parental consent?
Mhm.
So that doesn't, I guess that's where I'm struggling. It
Okay.
seems like if we are going to select option 2, we
That we should
should,
inform parents beforehand.
yes, and have parental consent.
Okay.
Not just inform, but have parental consent.
So you're talking about a notification to the parents,
Not just a notification, but
but
that
also
they
the
have,
ability to opt out.
that they actually, that we're getting the inverse of that they opt in.
Opt in. Okay. Would that be something we do at the beginning of the year
Like in our,
in the introductory package with
Registration.
everything else?
Might
With
be hard
registration,
to
It's difficult to
operationalize
do the
because
opt in.
we're required to do these drills. I think if you
we're
have
not
an
required
opt,
to do them though.
what's that?
How are, but we have an option to not participate in them. Option
Um,
1,
Students have an option to not participate.
right?
If we don't check that though, because what I'm saying is it would be better to have more operationally, it would be better to have opt out because
Oh, I see.
if we have, people won't see the email, they won't, you know what I mean?
If
So,
it's part of, like if it, when you register at the beginning of the year,
yeah,
we have to opt in for photos to be used.
yeah. Okay.
Do you think that would be difficult?
It would, because I just don't think, I think it would be better
To give them an option to opt out?
to opt out.
That's fine. I do think that there should be parental
Yeah.
consent. I mean, I guess I'm not stressed over opt in or opt out.
I agree with that. And I mean, I think that closer to, there should be more notification too, closer to when the
Yeah.
event occurs.
I think that would also save a lot of conversations on the back end that our administrators are currently having to have.
What
Yeah.
if we were to go two-tiered plan on this one, where we would instruct it to be part of the registration packet each year, where the parent is informed that they'll be notified the week before or a reasonable amount of time prior to this happening for the opportunity to opt out, so that the parents know at the beginning of the school year that these drills are going to be conducted, just like tornado drills, fire drills. These drills are going to be conducted, and and they will be notified regarding these particular drills ahead of time, so that they have the ability to opt out.
So if you're a principal and you've got 675 kids that you have to now check on the Wednesday before the next Wednesday just to make sure their parents responded, and then sort, where are you going to take them? If they opt out,
Yeah.
are your parents required to come pick them up at the time of the drill?
Yeah,
I guess, I'm trying to think of the logistics.
no, yeah.
I'm trying to think of the logistics for this, and I'm trying to understand a principal's burden with 675 notifications. And then how do you divide and conquer?
That's a really good point. Because
It
there's no
makes
telling what
sense
those.
conceptually, but
Right.
practically, it's really difficult. And we need kids to go through fire drills, right? Is this something much greater than a fire drill?
It can be. I mean, they're pretty
Active shooter. I mean,
intense.
it almost makes you want to categorize it by type of
Right.
drill, you know? In a perfect world. Would we like to table this one and?
We could, yeah, because there's some other things
Yeah.
under threat
I
assessment.
think what would be, I don't know about you, but I think one thing that might be helpful is if we were able to have somebody who conducts these drills, kind of walk us through
What they're like.
what they're like and why they think that it's important to do.
Mm-hmm.
That
Okay.
would be a great board presentation at a general meeting or an SLA.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe SLA.
Because I think the parents would want to know.
Yeah.
That would be of interest, and I think Daphne's point regarding separating these out between acts of God weather
Yeah,
and or bomb threat called in.
yeah,
Those sorts of drills are separate than
Yeah.
something that we plan and we're practicing.
and one of the things I wanted to talk about this one, and we can table it, is the threat assessment section on page 3. We do that, but when these threats happen, you guys saw in the news that somebody from Oregon was caught making threats in Canal and Pickerington. We believe that same individual is making threats here. We did go through these steps with the police. It's usually me, the principal, communications. It's not as formalized like this because it's hard to, in the heat of the moment, when you're trying to assess it, we do all these things, but we don't have necessarily a broad team like they're describing here do that, because you have to drop everything you're doing to assess it, right? And the way this is described here is very similar to what we do, but it's, you're in a meeting, you get pulled out, you assess the threat. The police department gives you, their advice on whether it's credible or not, and those are the kinds of things that, so I think this formalized approach, I get it, but I'm not sure in the moment. So I think it's something we need to consider.
Can we, when we do consider it, can we look at what the law requires?
Yes.
Because-
Yeah. I don't think this is an option, so I don't think it requires, but I'll make sure.
Yeah, I mean, if the language is this specific in the law, then it sounds like we don't really have a choice.
right.
Yeah, so,
But if it's not,
yeah,
then I don't think we need to have it be this detailed in the policy.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I also think we should table the next one, or transportation. I was just looking ahead, and there are some timelines in there. So like getting students to and from school in 30 minutes. I know they put that in there, and that might be part of House Bill 110, but I know we're not able to do that right now with our shortage of drivers. So I want to make sure I talk with Jason about that. So I think we should table that one, Daphne, the
Okay,
transportation.
wait, are you jumping? one?
I jumped, I'm sorry.
You
Yeah,
crazy guy.
There's one more in between, student
Yeah,
abuse and
okay.
neglect.
All right, so yeah, I agree with you when we get there. So next up is 8462, the student abuse and neglect.
Yeah.
And this one had some thinking. This was a table. This one has some new language. Kind of redefining some of current language. And I don't know, a lot of it's debatable. I think a lot of it comes from the SAVE Act
Yes.
language, right? Would you agree, Debbie? So the board official and employee making the report, I think, has to be checked.
Yes.
And we would have secure prompt medical attention.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it is Lisa Kelly reviewed it
Mhm.
and didn't give any comments that she didn't agree with anything, so I'm making the assumption that
Yeah, she is fine with this language, I
she's
believe.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns? All right, approve as presented. All right, the next one is 8600, and this is the one you're asking about.
Yeah, so there's some timelines in there, with getting students to and from school in 30 minutes.
Yeah,
I
we
know.
don't have that in our current.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I think it might be a part of House Bill 110, so I'd like to table it
Okay.
and find out.
So, I know we're gonna table this one, but just to, is this particular policy related to, is it in effect when the bus drivers hold the students on the bus for a certain amount of time before they let them off at the high school?
Yeah, 30
Okay,
minutes, I
so,
think is what it says.
so,
Yeah.
right, so if the bus driver arrives at 40 minutes beforehand, the students have to sit on the bus before they can come into the building.
Yeah, I think there's just so many complications right now with our shortage. So we have 64 routes and I think 66 drivers. And if people are sick, what we have to do is split up routes and it can take us longer than 30 minutes to get to and from. And so I want to discuss what's the remedy if we're not able to do 30 minutes? I mean, what is the consequence? And so I just want to make sure that I understand that. There's in House Bill 110, there's a lot of transportation language that I just want to make sure that we're going to approve the policy, that we can be compliant with it.
Sounds good.
And as you're doing that, on the third paragraph from the bottom of page 2,
Yeah.
it says the board shall approve the bus routes annually.
Yeah, we don't, that's the other one. You guys don't remember doing that?
6 years there, I
I
don't
have-
know that I've
I
ever
have-
done that.
I've never seen a bus route.
And you've been there longer than me.
I've
So,
Yeah, we have
never
to.
been presented, although
Should we do that?
that will be fascinating.
Is that the direction?
Well,
Is that something we're required to do?
I think part of House Bill, it might be we change that we're required to do so.
That'll be
it's
interesting.
not in green, so it's in black, but I noticed it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in House Bill 110 that are changes in transportation.
Yeah, it's in our current. So, yeah, we'll just note
That's
that.
one of the- Yeah, we haven't.
Okay, so we're going to table that one. Now we are at 8651. It's also transportation related, the non-routine use of school buses. Are you want to continue with this or?
No, I think we've tabled this one as well.
Okay. Our table is full. All right. It's all good though. I'd rather do it right than do it not. Okay, and then I believe it's our final one is 8740, and it's bonding. And this we had addressed in February of 2021. We made our own modification, if you all remember, when we talked about the fact that bonding was so, yesterday, and that it was cheaper and better coverage to go with insurance. And we had amended the policy to do a bonding / insurance approach. And so Neola must have had gotten wind of our idea here, and they have formalized it with better insurance language. So it just strengthens the insurance verbiage that we had inserted.
I agree,
Do you have any
Daphne.
issues with it?
Yeah, no, I agree. This just clarifies what's in our policy, although I would not check the box and property. Right now, it's covered for any issues related to funds and monies. Property is not something that would normally be included there.
Correct. It's not in the current policy, so I would not
Right.
add it. So does anyone have any questions or comments? Are we okay to approve as?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I believe we are finished. And I appreciate all of your attention and input. And thank you, Debbie, so very much. We accomplished a lot, and it was good conversation. So we'll bring those tabled ones back after they've been able to have some additional attention and have a stronger result. Thank you all.
Thank you.